Hello and welcome to Read Aloud 3, where it's you, me, and the Trinity. And we are reading in the book of 2 Kings, and we're in this really great place where we've been getting to our daily reading daily, and we're actually on the day of the week that it is. So if we can keep this up, it will be we'll know exactly where we're at according to the date for a good little while in the month of April. So happy Sunday, first day of the week. And today is, my pastor was just telling us, it's the where they shout Hosanna to Jesus as he comes through the streets on the donkey. And I'm trying to remember what it's right. Oh, either before or after Passover. Please straighten me out on this. I don't know my Jewish festivals well enough, even coming into Passion Week here. So I would love to learn from you. Thank you. Okay, so chapter 13 starts with Jehoahaz rules in Israel. Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, began to rule over Israel in the 23rd year of King Joash's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 17 years, but he did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He followed the example of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, continuing the sins that Jeroboam had led Israel to commit. So the Lord was very angry with Israel, and he allowed King Hazael of Aram and his son Ben-Hadad to defeat them repeatedly. Okay? I know, this just gives me pause. The Lord was angry at the sinfulness, so he allowed defeat, right? Makes sense. Like, that his people were called by his name would, stop and say, why is this happening? Now, I'm also reading in my own personal reading time in the book of Job right now. So let's make sure we don't put a whole theology on this, because there are times when we are following God, and like Job was following God, and he was very upright, and God allowed Satan to put him through this kind of a test of his faith, and then his friends were like, oh, you must be doing something wrong. That's why all this stuff is happening. So, and then God was very angry with his friends, right? Because they were not encouraging Job in his trial, and that's what God would have wanted, for them to realize that, God reigns on the just and the unjust. And so that's more of the theology in the Bible. But I think the reason why I stopped to say that is just that, sometimes I think also God gets our attention by, okay, this is failing, like, is there, check yourself and see, is there something that I'm doing that God wants me to, be turned towards him, and realize that, I need him. I can't continue doing this thing, what I'm trying to work out in my own strength, by my own will, and maybe going against his in doing that, because defeat can be a good thing. It can be a good thing, is what I'm saying. Okay, for the people of Israel, they were being defeated repeatedly. Because God allowed it, it says in this verse 3. Verse 4, then Jehoahaz prayed for the Lord's help, and the Lord heard his prayer, for he could see how severely the king of Aram was oppressing Israel. Yeah, pity on them. So the Lord provided someone to rescue the Israelites from the tyranny of the Arameans. Then Israel lived in safety again, as they had in former days. But they continued to sin, following the evil example of Jeroboam. They also allowed the Asherah pole in Samaria to remain standing. Finally, Jehoahaz's army was reduced to 50 charioteers, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers. The king of Aram had killed the others, trampling them like dust under his feet. The rest of the events in Jehoahaz's reign, everything he did, and the extent of his power are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. When Jehoahaz died, he was buried in Samaria. Then his son Jehoash became the next king. Next subtitle, Jehoash rules in Israel. Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, began to rule over Israel in the 37th year of King Joash's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 16 years, but he did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. The rest of the events in Jehoash's reign and everything he did, including the event of his power and his war with King Amaziah of Judah, are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. When Jehoash died, he was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. Then his son, Jeroboam II, this is the first time I've seen that, became the next king. Next subtitle, Elisha's final prophecy. When Elisha was in his last illness, King Jehoash of Israel visited him and wept over him. My father, I see the chariots and charioteers of Israel, he cried. Elisha told him, get a bow. Okay. So he's calling so this is King Jehoash, and he's calling Elisha his father. Okay, probably like a spiritual father. Elisha told him, get a bow and some arrows, and the king did as he was told. Elisha told him, put your hand on the bow, and Elisha laid his own hands on the king's hands. Then he commanded, open that eastern window, and he opened it, and he said, shoot. So he shot an arrow. Elisha proclaimed, this is the Lord's arrow, an arrow of victory over Aram, for you will completely conquer the Arameans at Aphek. Then he said, now pick up the other arrows and strike them against the ground. So the king picked them up and struck the ground 3 times. But the man of God was angry with him. You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times, he exclaimed. Then you would have beaten Aram until it was entirely destroyed. Now you will be victorious only 3 times. Then Elisha died and was buried. Groups of Moabite raiders used to invade the land each spring. Once, when some Israelites were burying a man, they spied a band of these raiders. So they hastily threw the corpse into the tomb of Elisha and fled. But as soon as the body touched Elisha's bones, the dead man revived and jumped to his feet. King Hazael of Aram had oppressed Israel during the entire reign of King Jehoahaz. But the Lord was gracious and merciful to the people of Israel, and they were not totally destroyed. He pitied them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to this day he still has not completely destroyed them or banished them from his presence. King Hazael of Aram died, and his son Ben-Hadad became the next king. Then Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, recaptured from Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael, the towns that had been taken from Jehoash's father. Jehoash defeated Ben-Hadad on 3 occasions, and he recovered the Israelite towns. And there's a reference to that in 2 Kings 10, 32 through 33. Okay, so I think we probably all have the same question on our minds, if I'm guessing correctly. The king seemed to be doing exactly what Elisha instructed him. So why was he expected to strike the ground more times than he did? I'm curious about that, and that's something I'm probably gonna, if I can't find it in the text readily, I'll do a little bit more digging, and I'll get back to it tomorrow when I come back on. Okay, so let's see. I'm just going to read from 17 to 19, because I think that encompasses the verses that, would have, where Elisha gives him the instruction. Well, actually, I'll go back even farther, where he starts to give him the instruction. Verse 15. Elisha told him, "Get a bow and some arrows." And the king did as he was told. Elisha told him, "Put your hand on the bow." And Elisha laid his own hands on the king's hands. Then he commanded, "Open that eastern window." And he opened it. Then he said, "Shoot." So he shot an arrow. Elisha proclaimed, "This is the Lord's arrow, an arrow of victory over Aram. For you will completely conquer the Arameans at Aphek." Then he said, "Now pick up the other arrows and strike them against the ground." So the king picked them up and struck the ground 3 times. But the man of God was angry with him. "You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Is this because there were that many bows and, he picked them all up and he stopped short?" Because the first one he shot an arrow, and then that's when he shot. The other ones he picked them up. And he told him to strike them against the ground, right? So he says he picked them up, but he struck the ground only 3 times. So, yeah, that is a query that I have. And then for the man of God to be angry because he didn't seem to follow through enough. So he says, "Then you would have beaten Aram until it was entirely destroyed," which was the word that he gave him. He said, "You will completely conquer the Arameans at Aphek." An arrow. This is the Lord's arrow, an arrow of victory over Aram. Okay. But then he says, "You would have if you had struck it 5 or 6 times. Now you will be victorious only 3 times." Okay. And those were some of Elisha's last words. Prophetically speaking, I'm guessing, because it says, "Then Elisha died and was buried," the very next verse. So I'm curious as to why that was said to the king, and I will be looking into that, and I will be coming back with some commentary tomorrow morning. I plan to be on the morning tomorrow, so have a good evening, and happy first of the week, and look forward to tomorrow. Good night.